to Parent-Tween Connection Talks, where we bring you insight from the experts who can help you navigate life with teens and tweens. I'm Clarissa Constantine, your host and founder of the Parent-Tween Connection. I've worked with teenagers and their families for more than 20 years, and I believe that the more supported and knowledgeable their parents and members of the proverbial village feel, the better they can connect with and advocate for their teens and tweens. And ultimately, that means we'll lose fewer kids to suicide. So join us as Parent-Tween Connection talks about anything and everything teen and tween related. And when we're done, we invite you to come on over to our Facebook group to continue the conversations. Today's guest is Elisabeth Stitt, an author, parent educator, coach, and retired school teacher. But Elisabeth says, even with all of that, first and foremost, she's a mother and a stepmother. And she's been through it all. The diapers, the terrible twos, the crazy teenage years, and even saying goodbye as the kids leave home for college. Elisabeth specializes in supporting middle school parents using her own extensive experience and expertise. She believes that while parenting is hard work, it can also be a ton of fun, even with middle schoolers. Our conversation is an absolute must-listen for parents who are either looking forward to middle school or who are already there and feel like they had these great relationships with their elementary school children and now they're kind of wondering where their sweet baby went. Just as kids' behaviors shift as they approach their teenage years, Elisabeth says the parenting approach we bring to the situation has to shift too. Listen in as we talk about the types of social, emotional, physical, and cognitive changes parents should be talking about with their kids, the reasons behind their kiddos' need to rebel and how to redirect that constructively, the shifts that parents need to start making from being captain of the ship to admiral of the fleet, or how discipline and consequences change. And we even talked about some of the things that middle school students should be able to do on their own. Miss Elisabeth Stitt in the house. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
So when I first conceived of Parent-Tween Connections, the Parent-Tween Connection Talks podcast, I knew that my immediate network was more in the high school realm and the college-bound realm, just because of the world that I've lived in for a couple of decades. And really our goal with Parent-Tween Connection is to support families with kids between the ages of 10 and 20. So when I started thinking about who I know is a rock star with that very peculiar middle school age, Elisabeth Stitt was the first person who came to mind. She gets middle schoolers, and thank all that is good and holy for people like Elisabeth who get middle schoolers. Because, I think a lot of parents get nervous or stressed or anxious about the teenage years. But they forget that they need to navigate like this seemingly alien stage from like 9 to 13, that they don't realize that can be quite as much of a challenge as it ends up being. So yeah, I know, Elisabeth, that you have said that that's really the stage when there's a major shift that needs to happen on the parents' front, like in the parents' mindset. And also being a coach myself, I know that mindset is a huge piece of any direction that we want to go. But talk to us, like, why is middle school so gnarly? Why is it so challenging? And like, what do parents need to think about as they're coming into that, hopefully?
Yes, good. So first of all, we know that they get their sex education talk and about the changes that are going to happen to them. The physical and maybe the emotional changes are going to happen to them. Here's the interesting thing. The kids, because they're kids, hear the information and don't believe it about themselves. And we're kind of the same way. We know the reputation of the age group, but we think, no, I have such a loving, close relationship with my child. Mm-hmm. My child is so great and so on track. And we're just not going to have those problems.
So we lie to ourselves, in essence.
Well, you know, denial. Yeah,
Okay.
a lie is a bit strong. I just think it's denial.
Okay. Fair.
And I think it's because all of the evidence that parents have had up until then may support the idea. Like if you have a fifth grader who hasn't popped yet, and fifth grade, I never liked teaching fifth grade because they start at the beginning as these sweet little kids and then they get infected throughout the year. And by the end of, by that period between spring break, which is now spring break and the end of the school year, it's just pop, 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 all over the place. And you have this very wide range of kids who are doing it in different times in different ways, and it's a very messy scene. If you're one of the moms, however, or one of the dads who's got a kid who hasn't popped yet, and you've still got this sweet kid, and he or she is responsible and doing his work and can keep track of stuff, and is still wanting loves and hugs with you and wants to get it up next to you on the couch and have popcorn from family movie day, that's great. And it might put you in a position where you're going like, this isn't going to happen to me. All this messy middle school pre-adolescent shifting stuff, it's not going to happen. We're going to be just fine. And then somewhere later, when they're 11 or 12 or maybe 13, you're having a perfectly ordinary day, and out of the blue, you get a raging dragon yelling at you, breathing fire about how horrible, mean, incompetent you are, and screaming, raging, door slamming, and you are shaken to your core.
Speechless. Like, this is horrifying. It sounds positively awful.
Well, right. It's almost easier when you have the 9-year-old who already can perfectly roll her eyes, lean on one hip, and look at you like, God, Mom. Because you're like, oh my gosh, something's coming. So either way.
So that's part of why we hear so many middle school parents going, where has my sweet little innocent loving baby gone?
Yes, that is it. That is it. Exactly.
Okay, so it's gonna happen.
It's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen in middle school, it's going to be even worse in high school. I have a client who's 15-year-old went home to her dad's, as she usually does, and in 3 weeks she just she hasn't been back home for 3 weeks, and she just like, I'm not coming home. It's like, boom, sever, that's it. And when I asked Mom to describe what their relationship was in middle school, Mom was like, oh, it was great, she was my buddy, we'd go get our nails done together. We would have coffee. We would watch movies. So it was a relationship which was too enmeshed, and Mom was too invested in keeping her as her little playmate kid, rather than recognizing that she needed the space. And because she is a sweet, loving girl, she really is. She kind of went along with it and went along with it and went along with it and went along with it. And then when she couldn't stand it anymore, she just shut down. Now, fortunately, her parents are divorced and she has another house to go home to as a way of getting away from her mom. But if she didn't, how else might that come out in high school, right? She might run away. She might go to drugs and alcohol. She might start getting a lot of relationships online where she was getting the kind of recognition of, I'm growing up, I'm becoming an adult, that she was looking for and wanting. So we want kids to go through this stage, actually, because the child's number one developmental job during middle school is not academic. It is to separate oneself and to find one's own identity. And so we really do want our kids to rebel somewhat and to push away. However, when it happens, it requires a new kind of parenting.
Uh-huh.
Because as the parent of a little kid, you were very rightly the captain of the ship, and you were running the show, and you were in control of things. And yes, we have not lived in a because I said so, or wait till your father comes home kind of world for quite a while now.
Right.
So it didn't look like that, but it did probably look something like kids kind of going like, okay, do I have to? Okay. And they were brushing their teeth, and they were putting on their pajamas, and they were getting to bed when they needed to, or they were helping you with something. And now, if you just expect kids to jump through your hoops as middle schoolers, that's going to clash, like instant obedience is going to clash with their developmental need to assert themselves
Right.
and to be their own person and to be making their own decision and to be running their own show.
Right.
And of course, this is hard because obviously they cannot run their own show 100%. And so sixth, seventh, and eighth grade are this kind of quicksand territory of a parent not knowing how much do I support, how much do I step in, how much do I let them swim or sink.
Mm-hmm.
However, much better to do it in middle school than to be doing this in high school.
Right.
So ideally, you've used middle school as your big experimental grounds and given some of the control over so that as they enter high school, they feel like they are beginning to take control of things.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to this mom of the 15-year-old, she's still checking a grade portal daily. And she's still talking to her child about assignments and about grades daily. This girl is 15 and a half, in almost 16. She's about to be there. In 2.5 academic school years, she is going to be starting as a freshman in college.
That is terrifying for parents.
It is terrifying for parents that their kids are going to be freshmen in college. But you know what? If they had a freshman in high school who was already 100% responsible for their academic work and their academic performance, who was taking responsibility for things like scheduling a dentist appointment, an orthodontist appointment, maybe even getting there on their own. I know today we tend to drive our kids everywhere. So we tend not to say to our kids, take the bus from school, go down to the orthodontist, get your
right, or like ride your bike or get there
or
on
ride
your
your
phone.
bike or something.
Right.
Although I will say to you, Clarissa, statistically, the world is not a more dangerous place in that regard, right? So if what we're worried about when we think about our kids traveling somewhere by themselves is stranger danger or molestation or anything else, statistically, the numbers aren't higher.
They're not higher.
No, they're not. They are still there. They are still present.
Absolutely.
But they are not higher than when we had all that freedom. And guess what? They're not lower either, even though we were taking really, really tight control of our children.
That's a good perspective because, I mean, obviously safety is a concern.
Yes.
And if it's not any more or less of a concern than it was, for example, in our day, then that's good information for parents to have.
Yes. All right. So let's talk about some concrete steps that parents can take.
Let's do it.
7th and 8th grade to begin to make the shift. One of the biggest ways they can make a shift is, and if you are a parent out there listening to this, I hope you're taking notes because this could save you. It's just the way in which you ask questions, right? Just shifting to, do you need any help with your homework in the next week?
Instead of,
you have a book report due on Friday. Have you finished the book? You need to finish the book. I read the paper and Mrs. Stitt says that the book report has to have 3 parts. I think the first part should be.
Okay. Which is much more appropriate for an elementary school experience.
Yeah,
like a second
right?
grade experience,
Yeah, right.
perhaps.
Yes. Our schools very much rely on parents to sort of teach kids how to chunk out their work and how to set up their work. So right, for a first, second, third grader, maybe fourth grade, when you do that first big longer report that has multiple sections,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's a great time for a parent to be really teaching a child how to structure work, how to approach work, how to chunk it out. But by sixth, seventh, or eighth grade, a child should be pretty good at doing it. Now, caveat, if you have a child with a learning disability,
Right.
if you have an ADHD child, recognize that the developmental milestones are going to hit in different places.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may need to give more support. And at the same time, you can still give the support by saying, what's your plan for your book report?
I don't know.
So, Clarissa, sweetie, if you did know, what would your plan be?
Uh, I don't know. Like, I see this playing out in my
You?
friends' homes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, honey, that's okay. You give it some thought and we'll touch base tomorrow. All right? So, I want to keep putting it back on the child
Okay.
because we do not want our children to sit in the land of I don't know,
Which is really easy to do.
which is really easy to do. And at the same time, it's disrespectful to let a child to listen to a child's I don't know and to jump in.
Say that
Because
again.
yeah, it is disrespectful to take a child's I don't know as a sign to say, great, your parent, know, and I will now take over the whole project.
Okay.
It does not respect their emerging selfhood.
Wow.
How are they ever going to know what they want or who they are or whether or not they like something or how they think they should do something
Mm-hmm.
if we don't give them the space to sit in I don't know and then move beyond it?
I know some people who could probably even incorporate this with other adults, never mind with sixth and seventh grade kids. All
So,
right.
right.
So give them
So
the
then
space. We'll come
when
back
we
to
jump,
it.
when we jump in, the message we are sending is you are incompetent. You are incapable of figuring this out. You need me to usher you through this whole experience.
Wow.
And guess what? When you had a first grader or a second grader,
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty much true.
Right.
They were new to this whole school thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of incompetent. They did need to be ushered through.
Right.
Your sixth, seventh, or eighth grader can do a lot more than you think.
Okay. So give them more of that autonomy, give them the space to process.
Yes.
And I think it's also, I know based on conversations you and I have had about development, I think it's probably appropriate to interject here that we need to remember that the kids' brains are not fully formed yet. And so part of it when we're jumping in is like their brains just don't function as quickly all the time, like in the same ways, because they're still learning these thought processes, and expecting them to respond as quickly as we would want them to respond is akin to expecting a baby to run a marathon in some cases. It's not intellectually, like neurobiologically appropriate to expect that. So giving them that space to process is really important.
Yes. And I'm not so unrealistic as to say that you just keep putting it back on them ad nauseum is going
Right.
to produce a result initially, right? So at some point, so Carissa, what's your plan? I don't know. If you did have a plan, what would it be? I don't know. Well, give it some thought and we'll get back. We can check in tomorrow. Okay, so now it's tomorrow. and I'm still getting, I don't know. It might then be time to say, well, did Mrs. Stitt give you an instruction sheet? Did you read through it? What do you think her goal is? What do you think her aim is? And sometimes when we put it in the third person, like, what is the teacher's goal or aim? It helps us to kind of stand next to our child a little bit and to look out at the assignment and then evil, awful, nasty teacher. Right? That mean old Mrs. Stitt. Like, what is it? What's her aim here? What is she looking for here? All right. So what did you think? And then get them to articulate it. And if they say, I don't know what the aim or the goal is, right, then you have to go back to the sheet and you have to read through it with them and you have to translate it. Let's hope that you're having this conversation with a 6th grader and not an 8th grader.
Right.
Right. And so your final step might be like, maybe you kind of need to nail this child down, right? Like it might be, well, looks like you need to get started with this book report. So are you going to do a book report on A or B?
Still giving them agency where they're choosing.
Yeah. This goes back to toddlerhood. Do you want the red sippy cup or the blue sippy cup? Right? Do you want to do a report on Harry Potter or on the one with the Hobbit? The Hobbit, that wasn't called, right? Sorry. Yeah, exactly. Right? Or you might say, given that the report is due on Friday, which is more realistic, to do a report on Harry Potter or The Outsiders? And, they may argue Harry Potter's more realistic because even though it's much, 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 much longer, they've actually already read it 6 times. And so they can think about it. Great. But if they haven't actually read them, then all right, Outsiders it is.
Right.
Right. And then you might have to go say, like, okay, the book is 195 pages. What would be a realistic, are you going to read 40 pages a day? Or are you going to read 50 pages a day? Yeah. So you might begin to bring it in. And this, again, for your learning disabled kids, they might need the support and the help to do it.
Got it. Well, and then I imagine there may be the case of, all right, well, if that's how much you're going to read, are you going to sit down and read it all in one fell swoop? Or are you going to take a break and come have dinner and then go back to it? Or maybe help them figure out like at what time they're going to sit down and do it. And maybe use the Alexa, set an alarm for blah, blah, blah time as a reminder, or, okay, sit down and read for 10 minutes. So you're going to sit down at 4:00 and you're going to read for 10 minutes and see how far you get, but like giving them guidance of like how to set that time frame up.
Yes. Yeah. We just don't want to rush to do it.
Okay.
Yes, actually, I would rather that they fail the book report, but they feel what it feels like to struggle figuring it themselves out during the week.
Right.
And then get it. And again, you have to know your own child. Mm-hmm. My suspicion, however, is that too many parents don't think their kids are going to learn any lesson by failing. And 6th grade, I mean, if you are listening to this in the United States of America, 6th grade is the perfect time to fail. Mm-hmm. Nobody doesn't go to 7th grade.
Right.
Right? I taught for 25 years. And in 25 years, I never had a single student who did not get promoted.
Right.
Okay, that's over 3,000 students. Not a single one did not get promoted. Right.
Well, and those are the kinds of things, those are the lessons, those experiential lessons that you can't learn other ways. And that, failing a book report in 6th grade has very different repercussions than failing an assignment in 9th grade or 10th grade when we're looking at potentially going to college for the kids who are college bound, recognizing not every kid is, but with the expectation that we at least want that to be an option. Yes. Failing in 6th grade has way lower impact than failing in 9th grade from a grades perspective.
Yes. Here's another shift I want parents to make, or something that I sort of, a concept I would like parents to absorb. And that is that our kids have a need to rebel. It's a biological need. And I used to think that the whole rebellion thing was just a byproduct of the hormones that were produced from the physical changes. And therefore, you just had all this extra junk going on. The social scientists understanding their current theory right now is that you are actually, when a teen takes a risk, they get extra adrenaline, extra dopamine, extra, yay, you feel great. So think about, when you get to the top of the mountain and you leap up on that top boulder and you are queen of the mountain and you feel good, they get that feeling, but tenfold. And you might say, well, why would the body reward them for climbing up the side of a building or for, balancing on the railing of a bridge? Because biologically, we needed teens to take risks, because when we were hunter-gatherers, we needed the boys to get mad and go out, I can do it, bump up against the other tribes where there was a girl who, instead of going, help, help, a stranger, went, oh, you're cute. And then that was how biological material got exchanged. And that was how we didn't have too much inbreeding. So we know, as with so many things, the biology has not caught up with all the shifts in society.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, right. So, but kids are still getting that biology. They're still getting that reward for taking the risk.
Interesting. Okay.
So here's our opportunity. We want to put them in risky behavior. Only we want it to be risky behavior that we can live with, right? So for a 6th, 7th, and 8th grader, risky behavior is really basically anything that exposes you, anything at all. So asking your child to run into the dry cleaner and to pick it up and to take your credit card and to pay the guy, I know my name is on it, it's going to be fine, and have them come back with the dry cleaning, is a risky move for an 11-year-old. When you ask them to do it, however, they get that rush and they come back and they are proud of themselves and they are feeling victorious. And guess what? It's so much easier to do that than algebra. And your mom is grateful. Like, yes, I don't have to park. Like, I don't have to find a parking spot. I can send the kid in. I can stay in the car and I get my dry cleaning back. What service? So when your mom goes like, thank you, Carissa, I appreciate that so much. This is like a genuine exchange, which you don't get for finishing your page of algebra.
Or your book report.
Right? Because at the end of the day, honestly, nobody cares about your book report.
Right.
And, 3,000 students later, I've seen a lot of book reports, which isn't to say that, I wasn't excited to see what kids made, but it didn't have any personal meaning for me.
Right.
When a child, does the laundry or picks the dry cleaning up or calls and waits for the you're trying to talk to the credit card company or something, when they stand in line and they act as your secretary and they listen and they listen and they listen. And the only scary part for them is to say, excuse me for a moment, when the customer service lady comes on and says, how may I help you? All they have to do is to say, excuse me for a moment, I'll get my boss and put you on the phone, right? They have done yeoman's service. Wouldn't you like to have a kid sitting nearby, listening to the recording, going over and over, and then getting you on the line when you were needed? Wouldn't that be great?
Awesome. Okay. So definitely put them in situations where they're going out to do things independently. It sounds like where
Yes.
it's that, even if it's unrecognized, perceived exposure.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question that I know has come up a lot in the Parent Tween Connection Facebook group relative to this age range. Chores.
Mm,
How does
yeah.
a family determine what's appropriate, and like what kind of involvement is appropriate for middle school kids in terms of things that just need to get done around the house? Another question that came up recently was, it was one thing to say, okay, here's the chores that I want you to do, but how do we actually get them to do the chores?
Yeah. Good. So glad you asked. All right. So here's my theory. My theory is that if a seventh grader, as my seventh graders did, could write a 1,500-word essay on a Renaissance figure with biographical information and then an analysis of whether or not that person met the definition of a Renaissance man with multiple sources and citations, there's pretty much nothing in the house that they can't do, right? If they can learn to do all that, they can learn to cook and do laundry and to clean and to mow the lawn and to weed the garden and to pay the bills online and to, organize or calculate or put numbers in a spreadsheet, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've got a sixth grader and eighth grader and mom and dad, to my mind, you have 4 competent human beings who are capable of doing housework. And let's face it, nobody really wants to do housework, right?
I don't.
No, right? I know that there are some people who really like, I know there are people who like to cook, and that feels therapeutic or relaxing or nurturing or something like that to them. And at the end of the day, I really wonder, like if you said, Clarissa, if I let you cook, every Saturday, would it be okay if I hired a chef to cook for you all the other days of the week? I just don't know that many people who would go like, no, my life would be so much poorer. I would really miss that. Right?
Yeah.
I don't. Or at the very least, if you said, yes, I'd like to cook. And if I said, well, what if I hired you a sous chef so that when you went to cook, all your vegetables were already chopped and your spices were already out of the cupboard, lined up for you, and the shopping had already been done. Like, I just don't know anybody who wouldn't go like, yes, that would make life easier and more pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have these kids. So what I like to do, and I actually have what I call a chore analysis chart. And it's every task sort of broken down into micro steps. And then it's columns. It's a spreadsheet with, mom, dad, child 1, child 2, space for other children. And it becomes the basis of a conversation, of a family meeting, to sit down and to say, who is currently doing what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's your perception of who is currently taking responsibility? B, what are tasks that you think that you already could do unsupervised? C, what are tasks where you feel like you still need training? And so then you look at that and you do that. And then you say, okay, so, is there any of these things you think you couldn't learn how to do? So far, I've never had a parent report back to me that their kid was like, I couldn't learn how to do that. I couldn't learn how to do that. Because they kind of know how patently ridiculous it is. I'm sorry, if you could do the quadratic equation, you can make a shopping list.
Right.
Right? So then they're kind of left with like, yeah, I guess I could do that. So then you can go, great. We're going to divide these chores so that everybody's doing a fourth of them. And some mom and dad will have more chores initially, but you will be the apprentice to that chore. Right. And you will be trained in that chore.
Well, and I like the way that you say that, like that you're recognizing that the kids don't necessarily know how to do it. Right.
Yeah.
Because I've heard plenty of parents say, but my kids don't do it right. And I was that kid that, my mom was like, go clean the bathroom. I remember very clearly we got in a fight on Christmas Day because I didn't do it up to her standards.
Yes.
And I was in 8th grade now that I think about it. So it was at that age. And to be fair, I also was like, probably like, fine, mom, I know how to do this. I don't need you to tell me. So there's an aspect there of that rebellion of like not wanting that insight,
Yes.
but finding a way along the way to be like, okay, here's how I like to do it. Here's how you're doing it. Can we find a middle ground, or setting the baseline that the kids don't know how to do it and it's okay, but we can learn how to do it.
Right. Yes. And the other piece of that is that I would initially recommend that you do chores with your kids. And it may be parallel chores. It may be, kid is doing A and you're doing B. But again, no one likes to do chores. It's not fun. And so, the families that do the chore dance party, that have the music, that rock the house, that, they say, okay, what can we get done in 20 minutes? And then we're going to go to the beach, and then we're going to go do something. They have more success because it's not, I have to do my chores. It's like, okay, we're all going to do this. We're going to have our rock party. We're going to get it done. Let's be accountable.
Right.
And how much can you get done in 20 minutes? Great. I'm going to get this, and this done. See you at the other end. And then there's some energy about it. And, maybe there's a TikTok video in there somewhere, little dance with the mop.
Right.
So, ways to bring some energy and levity to it that say like, yes, we can do this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm hearing is step out of denial. It's going to happen. If it hasn't happened yet, it will, and it's appropriate because this is the time frame that they are starting to recognize their own identity independently of what parents or the proverbial village see for them. And to shift from being the controller and the authoritarian into shifting over to say, well, how would you approach this? And what are your thoughts? And I'm going to give you some time to think about that, and we'll come back to it. I'm happy to help if and when you need, but I think you can handle this because you're smart and capable and competent, and honoring that in them. Recognizing that it's appropriate and we want them to rebel.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's that, and recognizing that putting themselves out there, going into risky situations is like drugs for their brain. But in a good way. And the more that we can have parent approved exposure opportunities, picking up the dry cleaning, going into the store, doing things independently where they're out in the world by themselves, simulates that. And am I understanding that you're saying that there's the likelihood that will then reduce other potentially risky behavior because we're satisfying that need in a mom approved fashion, hopefully?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Awesome. And then chores. Yes. If they can do all this eloquent writing with all of these fascinating bibliographies and references, they can do chores.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Cool.
And may I make one last point?
Yeah.
And it's this. It's not that we give up our expectations, right? We do want the chores done. And yeah, we do want you doing your best in school. And we even want you performing in school. And at the same time, we're going to give a lot more leeway in letting them figure out how they want to do it, right? So with the chores, first of all, here's the chore chart. Let's analyze. And then what chores would you be willing to learn? What chores would you be willing to do? And if child 1 and child 2 want the same chore, saying, well, okay, you guys work out a plan then. You guys work out a plan, right? You figure out what's fair and feels okay between you to do that. So that we're always, so here's like, yeah. So, okay, Clarissa, you agreed that bathroom cleaning was a chore that you were going to take on. And we've been doing it together for 2 or 3 weeks now. I feel you're ready to do it on your own. Are you ready to do it on your own?
I'll try.
Okay, great. If you're not done by Saturday morning, then we're having a tour party on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And we're going to rock the house with our tunes. And if you haven't gotten it done then, that's when we're getting things done. And if you're already done, then I'll be doing my chores.
And you get to relax.
And you get to relax. Right. So that still has a clear limit and a clear expectation. I've allowed for training. And I'm also leaving all this wiggle room to say, you can do it when you want to do it. You can figure it out.
Well, and what I'm hearing on that is that we also need to have consistency and backing up that we're going to do the chore party on Saturday at 10 a.m.
Well, that's true.
Because if I'm already done, as mom or dad, if I'm done with my chores, but kiddo isn't yet, I still have to make sure that we're doing.
Have a chore party. Yep.
Yeah.
You still got to play some tunes and rock it out. I'm sure you can find one more thing to organize.
Yeah, seriously. Awesome. All right. Well, Elisabeth, thank you. Thank you for being here. I know a number of moms in our group are going to be excited to hear about this, and just general population. For those of you who are not yet in the Facebook group with Parent Tween Connection, come on over. And for those of you who are subscribers to Parent Tween University, you definitely want to pop into the Facebook group and into your online resources through Parent Tween Connection, because Elisabeth is going to stick around and give us some exclusive insight just for our Parent Tween University folks on how to communicate more effectively with your kids.
I've got a secret tip.
What's that?
A secret tip.
Ooh. I kind of want to go back in time like 30 years and learn these things and use them with my parents. So anyway, we're over and out for the podcast. And again, if you have not yet subscribed to Parent Tween University, check it out and get some insider tips on communicating with kids. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Parent Tween Connection Talks. Be sure to check the show notes for any links we mentioned. Also, be sure to subscribe to Parent Tween Connection Talks on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you don't miss out on any awesome information. If you'd like your own copy of the Foundations of Connection, you can find it right on our homepage at parenttweenconnection.com. Print it out, hang it on your fridge, and use it as a conversation starter with the folks in your family today. And if you want to feel more supported as a parent and have a closer, healthier, happier relationship with the tween in your life, enroll in Parent Tween University. For just $19.99 a month or $199 a year, you'll join a community of parents just like you who are dedicated to having the best relationships they can with their kids. You'll receive exclusive bonus trainings from many of our podcast guests and access to monthly group coaching calls based on my signature coaching program, The Foundations of Connection. So go to www.parenttweenconnection.com today to help ensure that you're the one your kids will talk to when they need someone they can trust. Until next time, keep talking and keep connecting.